Hello, welcome to our showcase for it's Harvard Medical School genetics. We've been partnering with the Personal Genetics Education Program at Harvard Medical School. I'm June Bea, CEO of Bea Group, and we at Bea Group have been working collaboratively with the Downey Unified School District for a number of years on internship programs. And the last 2 years, we've been doing a virtual internship. With that experience, it's 6 weeks, it's paid. All of the interns with us started as juniors, and now they will be seniors when fall school begins. And so we are here with our deep dive, and our partners are, again, PG Ed. And I wanted to bring Nadine on to tell us a little bit more about the deep dive that our interns have been doing with Harvard. And hi, Nadine.
Hello, thank you for having us. I'm going to do the juggling of sharing screens now. There we go. So yeah, before we go to the important part of today's showcase, which is hearing about our intern projects, I just quickly want to introduce who we are as an organization and kind of the internship that our interns have been doing with us over the past couple of weeks. Maybe just a little bit of housekeeping announcement is that there are members of our team who really want to be here today. Their schedules don't necessarily allow them to be here full time for the whole showcase. So if you see people hop in later on or maybe have to hop off a bit earlier, hopefully that's not too distracting, but they're probably members of our team who are just trying to be here for as much of the showcase as they can. And so I should start off with saying good morning to you on the West Coast and good afternoon to anybody who's like us on the East Coast. The exciting thing about having this virtual program is that we can be a part of it because we're not physically close, but luckily with things like Zoom, we can be with you all. And so maybe first introduce what organization we work with. So myself and Robin, who's on the call, and she might wave or do a little hi. We've been the leaders on this internship project. We both work with an organization called the Personal Genetics Education Project, or PG Ed for short. And as June mentioned, we're based at the genetics department of Harvard Medical School. And really kind of the driving force between how our organization was started and the work that we do is the realization that genetics is becoming very personal. Me as a genetics researcher by training, like technologies that I was using in the lab are moving into society at a very fast pace. And we think it's very important to have conversations about this. And so what do I mean when I say genetics is becoming personal? Kind of maybe the most obvious area where you might encounter genetics is, for example, going to your doctor's office. For example, you're having children. Many people are asked like if they want to do genetic testing and things like that. Or participating in clinical research would be another example of kind of the medical health related field where genetics is becoming very personal. But there's also many other areas in people's lives where they might encounter genetics. So for example, a lot of people are interested in doing ancestry testing to learn more about their ancestry, their genealogy, their like family trees, things like that. Going to vote would be another area in life where people might encounter genetics. A recent example of that is in Florida. People had a referendum to vote whether they agreed with or not with releasing modified mosquitoes into the environment to combat Zika virus. And also interaction with law enforcement is where genetics and DNA are like tools that are often used. And so recognizing that genetic technologies are moving society very fast and most of us will encounter it probably multiple times in our lives. Our kind of mission statement, or really what our aim is, or what our goal is to have an equitable and safe future as these technologies enter societal use. And our kind of approach to that is very much through education and dialogue. We are an organization that wants to raise awareness about these technologies, have conversations with as many people as we can, so that they can make informed decisions both for themselves, their families, their communities as these technologies enter their lives. We're really focusing on raising awareness. We're not an advocacy group. We're not advocating for or against these technologies. It's really about people giving people the information so they can make decisions for themselves. And there's many ways in which we do that, but we're really focusing on meeting people where they are. And that can be through schools, right? Meeting both with students directly as well as with educators. giving them the tools to have these conversations in their classrooms. Like I said, we meet with communities. Communities of faith is one other group that, you know, when people have questions about their personal lives, they might turn to their community of faith. So giving kind of faith leaders those resources and being able to have those conversations. Congressional briefing, meeting with people at Congress so they have the information to start thinking about policy and regulation around these technologies as they enter society. TV and film, obviously when you're thinking about reaching people where they are, TV and film is something that a lot of people interact with, so that would be another kind of big way we try and reach people. And online, which today is a great example of the work that we're able to do with through Zoom and with people being in different locations, and yet we're all kind of talking about the same thing. So that's just in very brief what our organization does and what our mission is. And just again, like I said, a big part of what we do is write kind of educational materials that can be used. They're mainly targeted toward high school, middle school classrooms, but can be used in any settings. We've used these with, again, communities of faith, library events, like anybody who in any way is an educator in the most broad sense of the word is very welcome to use any of these resources. They're freely available on our website. And also with the challenges of last year and still ongoing this year, we've designed a lot of distance learning resources, which again, hopefully helps bring a lot of these conversations to people wherever they are. So how does all of this link to our internship and what we worked on with our interns? And so really what we're always interested in, because we want to meet people where they are, is like, what are the questions people have? What are their interests? And so the best way is to ask the groups that we meet with. So in this case, our interns are representative of, you know, young people. And we really wanted to know, like, what in genetics do you find interesting? How do you think is a good way to communicate that to your community? Was kind of our overarching goal. And so this was both for our interns to hopefully learn a bit more about genetics, but really it's about skill development that goes so much beyond this specific deep dive. Leadership skills, team working skills, communication skills, a lot of research skills, right? A lot of these topics were completely new to them and they did an amazing job in kind of researching and finding information, tailoring that to thinking about how to communicate that information. And you'll see we have both PowerPoint presentations today, videos. So it was very exciting to see the different ways in which they thought of communicating it. And there's many more skills I'm sure that came across that hopefully they can take on, whether they, you know, I'm personally a geneticist by training. I would love to see these people go on and become geneticists, but I also hope that for those who are taking different career paths, that these skills will be useful no matter what they're going to do next. The final thing I want to highlight before we really go to the most important part, and I'll stop rambling, is really what they've done here is design a small curriculum piece and think about what they want to talk about, think about how to interact with the audience. You will see some interactive parts, how to communicate it. All this work was done in a couple of weeks. This is work that our team takes months, if not sometimes years, to develop these pieces. And I really want to highlight that because it's incredibly impressive what all of these groups have pulled together in just a couple of weeks. And so with that, I'm going to stop talking so much because that's not very interesting. I just want to quickly let you all know a rough idea of our schedule. We have 5 groups presenting today. We'll have a short 5-minute break in between just so people can grab some water, quickly run to the bathroom if necessary. And at the very end, we'll have time for questions. So any questions you have for our interns or for us, we'll have some time at the end. And so with that, I'm going to stop talking. Robin, do you want to introduce our first group?
Sure, I'm happy to. So our first group up was a team who chose to focus on genetics as it relates to crime and law enforcement. So we chose to divide people up based on what their topic preferences are. So we have some teams that are larger than others. This is one of our larger teams with 5 people in it. So Ryan, Isabella, Daniela, Julian, and Isabella are our crime and law enforcement team, and they will take it from here.
Hi, everyone. I hope you guys are doing well today. We're the crime and law enforcement team. I'm Isabel Guerra. I'm going to soon be a senior at Warren High School, And the reason why I chose this deep dive is because I really enjoy science and I plan to do something in the medical field. So when I heard that this deep dive was called Harvard Medical Genetics, I knew right away that I really wanted to do this deep dive.
Hi, my name is Ryan Leal, and I'll be a senior this coming year at Warren High School. I chose this deep dive because I intend to study genetics in college, and also I chose crime because growing up, my dad actually was a cold case detective, and so he had a lot of like stories about solving crimes that were like 30 years ago using new genetic technologies and stuff. So that's a big portion of why I chose not only the deep dive, but like also our specific topic for our project. All right, Daniela.
Okay, hi guys. My name is Daniela Dionda. I'm going to be an incoming senior at Warren High School. And I think the main reason why I particularly chose this deep dive was because I hope to study in the criminal and justice field when I'm older, specifically the forensic sciences, anything related to that. And I really wanted to pick something that would have sort of like that would give me any sort of experience in that field. And especially since it's closely related to what forensics do and study, especially with the genetic makeup of humans, I thought that was very interesting, something that I've always had like a big interest in as well. So yeah.
Hi, my name is Julian Freiler. I'm currently going to be a senior at Warren High School. And the reason I chose this deep dive was because honestly, out of all the other deep dives, it just caught my eye the most. There's nothing in specific because honestly, I don't plan on studying in the medical field, but it's just something that caught my eye more than all the other deep dives.
And one of our teammates, Isabella, is not here right now live, but we have her introduction recorded. And I'll play that right now.
My name is Isabella Vidales and I am 17 and I'm an incoming senior at Warren High School. So the deep dive that I chose is the Harvard Genetics because I not only found it the most intriguing from all our options, but I was not aware that it affects us more than just medically. So our project is on crime and law enforcement and how genetics is involved in crime investigations. So we will be introducing 2 murder investigations and how genetics was used to find the killer, as well as how it affects the privacy of individuals. I learned how just one strand of hair can lead to finding a murder throughout the process, and the biggest challenge was just trying to design the presentation to be more interactive and interesting for our audience. So I personally enjoy learning throughout the process and researching crime investigations. But I hope you all enjoy our presentation and thank you for your time and for listening and for giving us this great opportunity. Thank you.
Did you know millions of people's DNA is stored in various databases? Some were originally created for the intent to keep track of convicted felons, like CODIS and ENDIS. On the flip side, people voluntarily hand over their DNA to databases for use in things like finding out your ancestry or discovering whether or not their genetics put them at a greater risk for certain diseases. Keep this question in mind for the first half of this presentation. Do you feel comfortable knowing that when you commit almost any crime in California, your DNA is entered into an extensive DNA database? Your initial answer might change or stay the same as we go through the presentation. We will introduce the various aspects of DNA and law enforcement and the implications they have on society and you as an individual.
Now, the first case we will be analyzing is the raping and murder of 8-year-old Victoria de Santiago that occurred in 1979. In this particular case, the DNA was a direct match with a DNA sample collected when the assailant, Fernando Caro, had committed another murder years later. These type of DNA banks get their samples when a criminal is arrested. For example, even people who commit misdemeanor crimes in California are subject to DNA collection. The case had remained unsolved for almost 30 years until new evidence, a single pubic hair, was rediscovered, and thanks to technological advances that had occurred since then, enough DNA was able to be extracted and the murderer, Fernando Caro, was sentenced to death. Here's a quick question to test people's knowledge of DNA. What's the difference between nuclear and mitochondrial DNA? A. Nuclear DNA is found in the nucleus and mitochondrial DNA is found in the mitochondria. B. Nuclear DNA comes from both parents and mitochondrial DNA is inherited from the mother only. C. Nuclear DNA is linear and the mitochondrial DNA is circular. Or D. All of the above.
The correct answer is D, all of the above.
Introduction. The technologies used to crack the case. In this specific case, DNA was extracted from the hair follicle. Hair is made up of two parts: the shaft, which is a visible portion of the hair, and the follicle, which is located underneath the skin surface. Most times, in order to successfully gather the DNA from a hair sample, the follicle must be attached. Beyond this, there are two main types of DNA that investigators aim to discover in a sample. The first is nuclear DNA, which is derived from the nucleus of the cell and is located in the follicle. However, if the hair follicle is no longer attached, mitochondrial DNA can still be found in the shaft portion of the hair sample. Methods like pressure cycling are commonly used to accurately extract and analyze the DNA samples. After the DNA was extracted from the sample, another DNA collection method was used. The prime suspect, Caro, was swabbed, and when the results came back, the two pieces of DNA evidence were an exact match.
Pressure cycling is a technology that uses alternating cycles of hydrostatic pressure between ambient and ultra-high levels in order to release target molecules safely and reproducibly from a variety of biological samples. In cold cases where evidence containing potential DNA has been sitting in an evidence locker for decades, the potential for contaminants or inhibitors, which are compounds which modify the catalytic properties of an enzyme and therefore slow down the reaction or prevent replication by blocking or distorting the active site, is heightened. That is where pressure cycling comes in. Pressure cycling is a technology that allows for DNA extraction from small contaminated samples. This allows for more accurate analysis of the DNA and it helps to eliminate any inaccuracies in the DNA sequence. This results in a higher possibility that the DNA sample will lead to a direct match with the DNA sample that is already on file in any of the given criminal DNA databases. The second method that was used in solving the Santiago murder was swabbing, which is used to collect cells from the suspect. This allowed the detectives to determine that the sample extracted from the strand of hair was indeed that of Caro. DNA swabbing is widely used. It is even used for ancestry testing. Even though this method of DNA testing feels familiar to us, it was not widely accepted as an accurate form of DNA testing until the late 80s. This commonly involves scraping the inside of someone's cheek with a long swab to collect cells that contain their DNA. This DNA can then be extracted from the cheek cells with the help of pressure cycling to then provide an extensive analysis of the suspect's DNA.
The increased accuracy provided by these technologies has the capability to impact society and individuals. For example, thanks to these technologies, people who were wrongfully accused can be acquitted once the DNA shows that they were never actually responsible for the crime in question. It also means people are less likely to be wrongfully convicted in the future. As we enter the second half of the presentation, we would like to pose a new question. Do you feel comfortable knowing that when you submit your DNA for ancestry or health analysis, it could be potentially used for evidence in the investigation of a crime?
Before we move on, we want to make sure that everybody in the audience understands the difference between an ancestral database and a forensic database. An ancestral DNA database is a DNA database that provides an ethnicity estimate and a list of DNA matches that reveal potential relatives or family trees, while a forensic database is a centralized DNA database for storing DNA profiles of individuals that enables the act of searching and comparing DNA samples collected from a crime scene against others that are stored in the profiles.
The second portion of our presentation will revolve around the murder of Allison Feldman, which, unlike the murder of Victoria de Santiago, was solved through familial DNA. Familial DNA is defined as a partial match of DNA that often leads to a family member of the suspect found by tracing back someone's X or Y chromosome. The investigators had run through the entire criminal DNA database after discovering a half-finished beer bottle on the crime scene. They finally came to the conclusion that there might be a chance to find a partial match to the DNA on the crime scene if they were to expand their resources and utilize public ancestral DNA databanks. After appealing to the court, they were able to finally access these databanks, and by doing so, they were able to find a partial match through the killer's brother, leading to the arrest of Ian Mitchum.
In this case, DNA from the crime scene was compared to samples stored in ancestral DNA banks. Most of the time, because private companies like 23andMe are hard to access, public databases are usually the best option when it comes to trying to find a partial match. In this case, the prime suspect was likely male, and therefore the most accurate way to trace someone based on their gender is by following either their X or Y chromosome. Because men only have one Y chromosome, an identical chromosome is passed on to both sons, which is why when they ran the DNA from the crime scene through an ancestral DNA bank, it came back with information on the killer's brother. They both share an identical Y chromosome.
Consider this. Familial DNA is often a partial match. This opens up doors for a flurry of complications. For example, if crime scene DNA traces back to someone like a sibling who had no affiliation with the crime, they could potentially be accused for the murder. And even if they weren't, their privacy would have been breached without their consent. Association with serious crimes could lead to losing things such as your job or even your family.
Even though only 12 states currently allow law enforcement to use DNA databases other than those specifically used for forensic purposes, commercial DNA test providers are fighting back and voicing that they are not comfortable with the invasion of privacy. It likely never comes across an individual's mind that when they want to find out about their heritage and submit their DNA for analysis, that law enforcement has their DNA at their disposal. And even though widening the spectrum of available DNA samples could open up doors and put criminals behind bars, we'd like to ask the audience, do you think it is worth compromising the privacy of individuals if it means law enforcement can solve cases that forensic DNA banks have failed to provide adequate DNA evidence for?
Before moving on, I want to ask one person to volunteer to give their answer to the question that was just asked. And anyone could volunteer, and if not, we could pick someone from the audience.
Natalie said that she can.
Okay. Go ahead, Natalie. And give your explanation as to why.
Okay, I'm honestly a little bit neutral about this because it would be nice to, people use the 23andMe to find, like long lost sisters or family members that you never knew you had, but it isn't right for, for law enforcement to have your DNA because like, we don't know how advanced their technology is because if anything, they can clone you. I don't know.
Mhm.
I get like paranoid, like they could clone us using our own DNA and use it for their own special research.
I mean, considering how fast technologies are advancing, I feel like that's not so far-fetched, to be completely honest. So thank you for your input.
Now that we've completed the presentation, take a moment to evaluate your answer to this question and decide whether you agree, disagree, strongly agree, or strongly disagree with the following statement. If Gato hadn't had his DNA entered previously into a criminal database and there was a possibility investigators could find a partial DNA match by searching through an ancestral DNA database, it would have been justifiable for them to do so if it meant they could make an accurate arrest.
Okay, so now that we've reached the end of our presentation, what do you have any volunteers to answer this question as well? Just whether you strongly agree, strongly disagree, or disagree with the following statement.
Hey, Ryan, I launched a poll so that people can vote.
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Okay, that's really good.
We'll give people a few more seconds before we
Got it.
sit down. Few more seconds if anybody else wants to put their opinion in there.
Can you briefly clarify what agree and disagree would mean?
Agree would mean you think it's justifiable for them to access databanks that were not originally created for the intent to track criminals. And you think it's okay for them to go into other sources like public databanks through that get their DNA samples from things like ancestry testing and stuff like that. And disagreeing would mean you don't think it's okay for them to breach people's privacy potentially, even if it meant that they could make an accurate arrest.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to shut the poll down and share the results here.
Would someone who agreed with the statement like to say why they agreed?
So I put agree, just because it's kind of like a liberty versus order type of debate. And I think in this sense, I believe you said that he had like prior DNA in a database because of another criminal arrest. So I think at that point you kind of gave up a little bit of your liberty for whatever the rest might be, even wrongfully arrested. I think having DNA just helps out because I don't know, if you're not afraid of like that you're gonna do something again, you know, I don't see
Exactly. Well, thank you. Anyone with disagree want to say why they disagreed?
If no one wants to go, I'd like to share my answer for disagree. I think someone who would disagree would feel like they'd be breaching privacy and that'd be wrong, which is completely understandable.
Now that we've discussed all those questions, I think it's time for us to share our experiences, starting with Isabel.
So my personal experience throughout this internship has been really great. I got to, while I was learning, I also got to improve on my skills, like my communication skills and leadership skills. And I'd also like to thank my team for working. Although we did have our ups and downs, we'd always pull through at the end. So thank you. We really had I had a great team as well as great mentors. So I'd like to thank Robin and Nadine for taking the time to always and being patient. So thank you.
For me, it's definitely been an interesting experience because personally, I've never met anyone on my team and we've never gotten to see each other face to face. So our communication was completely virtual. And making a project was really hard, especially the part where we had to send each other's voice memos. That was that was an interesting process because we had to keep on updating scripts. Everyone was like kind of flustered with what slides they were doing, and also the volume. It was like kind of hard to get everyone on the same volume, but we did it, and we messed up a couple of times, and Nadine and Robin they understood. They helped us get through it, and they told us what to do in the future to avoid making the same mistakes. And I think in the end, I learned how to take initiative and just work with people who didn't know in the past. So that's my experience. And I really, 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 really enjoyed it. And then now it's you, Daniela.
Yeah, so okay, so sort of to start off, I feel like what I took away from this was that like how important and critical like communication is, especially in a workplace. And I feel like that was something at first that we sort of lacked and weren't very good at expressing like, hey, like when we were going to be available and stuff. I feel like what I learned also was the different types of DNA like testing that was available, and also the type of technology that they're able to use now and extract DNA from certain databases, which I thought was very cool. And personally, I feel like for our group, our biggest challenge was the availability of all our group members. It was really hard for us to pick days and times when, like, you know, I was available, sometimes they wouldn't be available, and vice versa. And even though, yes, all this is like totally like virtual, and at times it was stressful because like we had stuff going on and like no one would answer. But eventually we got the hang of it, and I feel like we really pushed through. And yeah, I feel like also another thing was getting started with our presentation. It was really rough at first, but in the end, we all, you know, took accountability for what we're going to do. We all stepped up, and our project turned out the way it did. So yeah, it was a really great experience, and I learned a lot. So I just want to say thank you guys for the opportunity, for letting us be here. So yeah.
Yeah, like Daniela said, one of our biggest problems at first was our communication, because there is at one point where we missed one of the deadlines and no one told Robin and Nadine anything, but we got through that and we worked past it and we bettered our communication and the latter part of our project building. And I had a great time overall. It was a good experience. I learned of the importance of DNA and the crime and law enforcement and connecting it back into cases. And I know that it could be a controversial topic, but it's still something that's important and it needs to be discussed. But it was a good time working with my group. We all collaborated well and communicated well at the end. And yeah, I enjoyed the experience.
I think to sum it up, we just want to say thank you, Nadine and Robin, for taking time out of your day consistently to help us out when we needed it. And thank you, June, and all the people from Work Wonder for like giving us this opportunity in the first place. Because like at my old school, like there was nothing like this. Like I've never seen a program like this in my high school career. And I think we all really appreciate it. So just a big thank you to everyone who helped us and who gave us this opportunity. That is our presentation.
I like the silent Zoom clap. It's even better than the golf clap. That's awesome. Well, thank you, crime and law enforcement team. It was a pleasure for Nadine and I to work with you as well. June, did you have comments? I see you're unmuted, so roll with it.
Yeah, I just wanted to, so thanks for that information. I learned so much from your presentation. That was amazing, just how you put it all together, and even just hearing how the challenges of working remotely and with all of the schedules. Because for everyone watching, just so you know, when we started this internship 6 weeks ago, it was literally when California, quote unquote, opened. And we had been at home, and suddenly there were lots of different opportunities that were open. And so this was something I just wanted to acknowledge, that you all stuck with it and you all persevered and completed. So I wanted to say congratulations. And then I also wanted to introduce someone who joined us from the Downey Unified School District. So John, are you in a space where you want to say a few words?
I am. Good morning. My name is John Harris, and I'm the director of the College and Career Readiness Department with the Downey Unified School District. And we oversee the internship program along with lots of programs and pathways in the career technical education area. And I just want to say congratulations to all of the interns on the last handful of weeks that you've worked on pursuing learning. And that's become very, very evident in the first presentation that we've seen, and I'm sure will be in all the other presentations, both in this deep dive as well as others. I think Ryan really put it best when he expressed gratitude in terms of saying thank you. So I'd like to extend a thank you to Nadine and Robin in leading these students, our students, through this process of discovery, of learning. And thank you very much in working with our students over the handful of weeks. I'm sure our students will remember your input and your direction and guidance for years and years to come. In fact, they may end up telling their grandchildren about you, speaking of genetics. Also, a thank you to the BEA Group in our partnership with them and all that is involved in launching something like this. We used to do internships that were in person, and when the pandemic hit, many districts had internship programs in the summer, and they just simply canceled their internships. But the Downey Unified School District really took a different approach in terms of pivoting, looking for the opportunities in order to secure benefits for our students. And quite frankly, I'm not sure that we would have been able to work with folks that were in Massachusetts at Harvard had it not been for us pivoting to a distance learning, a distance internship model. And for that, we are very, very grateful that we had a Board of Education that had the vision to support and to encourage us to go forward in supporting our internship program that would be online. There were certainly folks that wondered whether or not it would work. And quite honestly, I have to say, it seems to have worked way better than we ever imagined that it would. And so with that, we have a lot of gratitude that we're in this space. And with that, I hope I didn't miss anybody in terms of the thank yous, in terms of folks that are there. If I have, I hope someone else will acknowledge them along the way. Interns, congratulations. You've just done a phenomenal job. And, I think Nadine said that she was incredibly impressed. We're all incredibly impressed with your work doing in a couple of weeks, which would take other folks a lot longer time. So with that, those are my comments. Really, really impressed with your work that you're sharing today. Thank you.
Thanks, John. All right, Robin, go for it.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, John. It's been our pleasure really working with all these interns this summer. It's been a lot of work. It's been a whirlwind, but it has been a lot of fun. So, okay, well, we will move on to our next group. And this particular group decided to focus on a topic related to genetics and health. And so they're going to be talking about kind of the concept of complex traits. So this is another one of our larger groups with Nicholas, Roxana, Haley, Lorenzo, and Adrian.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lorenzo Blankenship. I'm an upcoming senior at Warren High School. And initially, I chose this deep dive because I'm interested in going to the medical field. I really wasn't too interested in genetics at first, but I was still able to learn a lot through this experience. Adrian.
Hello, I'm Adrian Bermejo. I'm an incoming senior at Warren, and I chose this deep dive because it was the one that jumped out to me, the one that was most interesting. It reminded me of like different movies like Gattaca and like the controversial subject of eugenics. And this all relates to engineering in the like field of genetic engineering, things like CRISPR and genome editing. And yeah.
My name is Nicholas McDaniel. I'm a rising senior at Warren High School, and I chose this internship because, like many others here, I want to pursue a job in the medical field. And I feel this combination of medical education is, along with genetics and the ethics and how it affects society, will really benefit me and many others in the upcoming years. Roxana?
Hi, my name is Roxana. I'm a rising senior at Warren High School, and I chose this internship because I actually want to study genetics, and I'm not quite sure what exactly in the field of genetics that I wanted to study. So this internship has definitely opened my eyes to all the possibilities there are to study in the field of genetics.
Just a heads up, I actually think we're missing one of our teammates, Haley. I don't see her. So we'll just move on without her. If she comes in, she could speak, but I know Lorenzo's gonna share our video. It's a project about complex traits, as Robin said, and it's a lot to take in, but it's a great subject. It's a great topic for everyone to learn about, and yeah, take it away, Lorenzo.
In modern school, we are generally taught that one gene causes one trait. However, most human traits have multiple factors that contribute to it. These are called complex traits. Complex traits are traits that have many genes and environments that influence them. For example, there is no one factor that changes a person's height because it is influenced by hundreds of genes, as well as the environment, such as the food you eat. We chose to focus on complex traits related to cognition and psychology. Our goal is to inform people of various examples of these complex traits and the importance for society to understand them. Throughout this video, you will notice that not only are there multiple factors, but all of the factors are not yet known.
Schizophrenia is a neurological disorder that can affect a person's thinking, perceptions, and senses. Schizophrenia was first described by Dr. Emil Krapp as dementia praecox in the 19th century. About 0.25% to 0.64% of U.S. adults are diagnosed with schizophrenia. Most diagnoses happen between adolescence to age 30. Deletions or duplications of letters in the DNA code are common factors that lead in the risk of schizophrenia. Schizophrenia can be caused both genetically and environmentally. Schizophrenia tends to run in families, and if an immediate family member has schizophrenia, there is an increased chance of getting it. People with schizophrenia often deal with discrimination, violation of their human rights, and stigma. People who are diagnosed with schizophrenia are prone to violation of their human rights inside of their communities and mental health institutions. Some of the discrimination that people who have schizophrenia are subject to is limited access of healthcare, education, housing, and employment. More than 69% of people that are diagnosed do not receive the appropriate care. There is also a lot of stigma around individuals who have schizophrenia, which tends to paint them in a bad light, such as that they have a tendency to be violent when they tend to suffer from being victims of violent crimes, and they are often labeled as not being able to make decisions for themselves.
Autism spectrum disorder and Asperger's syndrome. A brief history of autism. The concept of autism was coined by psychiatrist Eugen Bleuler in 1911. In 1943, Leo Kanner created a specific definition for autism. In 1944, Hans Asperger named a similar condition Asperger's syndrome. In 1994, the American Psychiatric Association began to classify autism as a spectrum, and in 2013, Asperger's was included as part of said spectrum. So what's autism? Autism spectrum disorder is developmental disability which impairs cognitive actions such as learning and communicating. There is no gene that consistently causes autism spectrum disorder, including Asperger's syndrome. Rather, there is a combination of various genes and environmental factors found to be linked with the autism spectrum.
The idea of variation in autism spectrum disorder. There has been arguments of autism spectrum disorder being either genetic or environmental. However, the cause is obsolete within this discussion because it inherently puts the blame on one factor, and this is simply not the case. Complex traits follow variation and the factors within genetics and the environment, not just one cause. Humans are the perfect example of variation. Genetically identical twins are still varied from each other through environmental factors. Two people raised in the same home may environmentally be alike, but will always be genetically different. This is the beauty within variation. Every human has forms of variation and complex traits, and some of this causes autism spectrum disorder. No one should feel more or less human due to certain traits, but should rather see the beauty within their variation.
8.4% of children and 2.5% of adults have ADHD. But what is it? Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is one of the most common mental disorders affecting children and many adults. ADHD symptoms include inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. So how does genetics play a role in this? As regular genes work, you are more prone to get something due to genetic history. This works the same way with ADHD. ADHD tends to run in families, and genes you inherit from your parents are a significant factor in developing the condition. Society tends to make people with disorders feel out of place and as if they need to change. This goes both ways. Society needs to be educated more on topics such as these instead of trying to make them fit in. People tend to see ADHD as an excuse for laziness and sloppiness. What they don't know is that ADHD symptoms appear to come and go, depending on the situation. Our society seems to think if your grades are poor, you won't make it. This is especially true for people with ADHD because it can affect academic performance, which worsens the stigma. For schools, it is not mandatory to educate people on disorders, and because of that, people stand by the stigma. Researching ADHD and advocating for them can help overcome the stereotype.
Today we have looked at 3 examples of complex traits related to cognition and psychology. Those 3 examples being schizophrenia, ASD, and ADHD. We have learned that multiple factors contribute to these traits and that all factors are not yet known. Now, we want to know what your opinion on society's treatment of people with these traits is. So the question that we'd like you guys to answer, you guys can feel free to unmute or answer in the chat. What do you think society can do to be more inclusive of people with differences in cognition and psychology?
Maybe something that like school, workplace is like they could have like a workshop like once a month or something like that and provide, educate people on what they could do to help.
Okay, so a workshop for like other students or coworkers to be informed on these differences. Anybody else?
Something that reminds me of is like how we have those equality workshops, but like more tailor them towards revolving around things like provide not I don't like I think it's important. I think in school especially to like think of those like kids with special needs, like don't think of them as disabled, think of them as like you just have to work around it a little differently. Like they're just as capable as anyone else. They just need a little bit more specific learning techniques and stuff.
Just teach people to understand that some people just are different than you.
Yeah, it shouldn't be considered a disability.
Yeah, I feel like we should definitely be like more inclusive to them and always like have them attend certain events. Obviously, like, make sure that they're not left out because at the end of the day, like if we include them in the things that we do, like they'll also be able to do what we're doing.
I think also another good idea, I'm sorry if I interrupted anyone, but I think a good idea would be to tell teachers if they have like ADHD or whatnot so that they can talk to the student or students and see if they need any assistance because I'm pretty sure someone who has ADHD and the teacher isn't aware of the teacher might, grade them badly or like just go way too fast for their pace and whatnot. But I think that would be a good idea.
Sounds good. Anybody else?
I have a question. I'm wondering, I've read papers that say, and through experience, that some of these traits that you've been talking about actually confer some really incredible strengths and advantages. And so I wonder if those can be emphasized. I know in my research lab, we often see people with traits like this or indications of traits like that, and it's not considered disadvantage, in some cases an advantage. Do you find that in your classrooms?
I see that Natalie answered in the chat. She said yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I was at an understatement. There are some incredible genius capacities we see in the lab, and it comes with maybe not ability, a less ability to focus entirely on one thing, and their genius comes from being able to focus on 5 things at the same time. So I'm glad you see that in your classrooms.
Yeah. For context, y'all, Ting is Nadine and my boss and a research lab at Harvard.
No, that is definitely, we have no.
Since a random person is talking about research in their lab here, it's good to have some context.
PG Ed is a chaotic place of a lot of ideas happening all at the same time. So
thanks for being here, Ting.
Oh my goodness, I'm thrilled and honored to be here and hear the presentation. I love the comment about variability being beautiful. I totally agree with that. Straight down when we look through the microscope, and variability in our lab among people. So I love that presentation. I'm sorry I came in late.
I'm curious, Natalie. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Robin.
Oh, I was just gonna read the comments in chat. But apparently a comment from YouTube saying schools can acknowledge their individual needs and offer them services that would help them keep up in the classroom. And Natalie said, my brother has ADHD, and that has actually allowed him to learn many things at once because he couldn't just focus on one thing. So
oh my gosh,
that is the key. So often difference gets shown in a light of like being somehow negative in some way instead of shining the light on the positive parts of it.
And so Natalie said she'd be willing to share. So Natalie.
I'm not entirely sure on what to share, but yeah, he's been struggling with this for a while, and he had some trouble getting through school, but he's actually tried to use the advantage of not being able to focus on one thing to learn many things at the same time, which, helped him, and it shaped him. It helped him become who he is now, and he's really smart.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to hear that. There's some people in my lab who I am complete awe of them. They can carry on 3 conversations at exactly the same time and not miss a detail in those conversations. It's incredible. Can your brother do that?
Yeah, he can. He can play video games while watching a video while on the phone with friends. So it's pretty crazy.
Exactly. Yeah. I have someone in my lab who, one of the first things she told me, she said, I'm Asperger's. And I have to tell you, she is one incredible genius in the lab. People are always trying to hire her away from me because she's just stunningly able to do things that no one else can do.
That's great. Thank you all for sharing your presentation. Would you like to take a moment and each of you talk, kind of reflect on the experience of working on this project and doing this internship?
Okay, I'll start.
You can stop sharing your screen if you want. We might be able to see you a little better. Thanks.
Going to this internship it's been a great experience for me. Like through the middle of in building our project, there was a challenge that we had to reframe our project because it didn't really fit into one theme. It didn't really have structure to it. And doing my research, my part, we had to get rid of it. And that was it kind of irritated me a little bit at first because I was like, oh, I did all this work, but I was able to learn that you think you have a good idea, but it turns out that it might not be the best, and it's okay to accept that change.
Wow.
Roxana?
Yeah, my experience in this internship has been mostly positive. Like Lorenzo said, we did have to reframe our project, and it did kind of hurt because we thought we had done. I thought we had done a pretty good job. So for us to reframe it, it was definitely a little bit hard, but in the end, I think we came out with the better end product. So I think I don't really have any complaints because I'm still proud of the end product. And some skills that I have learned were better communication, especially throughout this whole experience being online.
Building off what Roxana said, working with a team and adapting to issues, things like scheduling. Sometimes all our team members couldn't show up. They had previous commitments, so we would usually try to base our schedule and try to meet one-on-one at least, especially for things in recording. And one of the best parts was the help from Raman and Nadine. Thank you very much, because you guys really helped us to guide our presentation in the right path, because we thought we were doing well, and you guys told us that, oh, there were still a lot of things to do, still a lot of things to work on. So thank you.
Yeah, I would say it's been an incredible experience. I would do this entire internship all over again from January all the way to now. It was awesome. It really accelerated my love for medicine, for genetics, and overall for ethics of different patients and people. And it's gonna teach me, as a future physician, not to just diagnose problems or symptoms, but to kind of see the patient as a whole and understand what's going on. And again, Robin and Nadine, you did an impeccable job of teaching everything, and really pushing us to continue our education and continue research. And it's been amazing working with you two and my entire team. And it's going to be a recurring theme throughout the entire showcase here, but one of the hardest parts was definitely communication. Just everything being online, over the phone, over text, over anything, not getting immediate answers and having, periods of confusion. But it kind of pushed us together to be a better team and focus on teamwork. And I got only positives out of this internship. So thank you all.
All right, was that everyone? I think Haley is not here, but yes, thank you all for your kind words. And I know it was rough because there was a shifting of focus and kind of some major rework that had to be done to pull this into a cohesive thing. But I'm with you and feeling like at the end of the day, you came out with a much better product that worked really well together. And you guys, I mean, we told you, you chose a really difficult topic that is not completely understood yet, and also is very personal for a lot of people. So navigating ways in which to talk about this subject in a way that really fosters, respecting everyone's humanity and bringing light to the fact that there is beauty in variance, I think is really important. And you did a nice job.
And to add to that, to some of your reflections, like I don't think any of you were doing a bad job at any point in time. It's all part of the process. Like I think both Rob and I have had those experiences, like you research something and you put a lot of effort and time and write up things, and then it just turns out it doesn't fit with that project that you're working on. It's painful. I've been there. I think many of us have been there. And so I really recognize when you said that. And I'm sorry I had to go through it. I hope just to take a little bit of comfort, and that's part of how these projects for us very often go. And we have like folders, I think, all stacked away with little tidbits of information that we're hoping to put in on a later project. And so to me, you've done an amazing job throughout. I never felt that you were falling short. It's just part of the process, and I'm super proud of what you build in the end. It's a beautiful video.
All right, thank you, genetics and health team. Next, sort of related but different. This one, the next group focused on genome editing and health, because we know there's a lot of relationships between genetics and health, right? And then we also know like genome editing is this huge topic that's getting a whole lot of focus right now. So we did have one team that focused on genetics and health that specifically did not involve genome editing. And then our next team has a project related to health that does involve genome editing. And this is one of our smaller teams. So next up is Jocelyn, Natalie, and Anthony.
Alrighty. Hi, I'm Jocelyn De Alba, and I'm an incoming senior at Downey High School. And I've always been a person, well, the reason I chose this specific deep dive was because I've always been a person who's been interested in learning new things. And once I heard what the Harvard Genetics deep dive was, I instantly became interested, and I just wanted to learn more about it.
Hi, I'm Natalie. I am also an incoming senior at Downey High, and I joined this deep dive because I had always had an interest in the medical department, but I just didn't know which path I wanted to take, whether it was a surgeon, a nurse, any of that. And so seeing this genetics deep dive, I figured it would be a good way to start learning and start seeing what options I have. And so, yeah.
Hi, my name is Anthony Zuniga. I apologize for having my camera off. I'm out of the country at the moment, and the internet's kind of slow, but I'm currently a senior at Downey High School, and I chose this deep dive because of my interest in the medical field. My mom's been working as a nurse for about 10 years, and the story she tells me about her experiences has always been an inspiration for me. But also, I feel like the genome editing path has so much potential for the future, and like not only medicine, but the benefit for our society as like a whole.
Okay, so today we want to present to you our project we worked on. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Alrighty. So many may be surprised to hear that there was and still is a worldwide shortage of organs. More than 60% of donated hearts and lungs are deemed unsuitable for donation. Organ donors don't necessarily die at the most convenient places or times. So while about 20 to 22 people die every day waiting for a transplant, the person waiting for your specific heart or lung might not be within the 4-hour distance needed for the tissue to survive. So the shortage of organs is affecting many countries, and the ones who have taken the biggest damage are France and the United States, which is due to COVID. Doctors have to make sure that no donated organs risk chances of infecting patients with COVID, which makes the process of finding viable organs much more difficult. And even though 95% of Americans support organ donation, less than half are actually registered as donors. So as of right now, more than 112,000 people are waiting on the US National Transplant waiting list. Are there any possible solutions to this problem?
CRISPR is a gene editing technology that alters a DNA sequence. CRISPR is shortened for CRISPR-Cas9 or Cas9, and that works when it hooks onto the RNA. Sorry, and I'm sorry. It hooks onto the RNA that then makes along the strands of DNA until it finds and binds to its target sequence. CRISPR technology was first implemented in 2013 and is cheaper to use than previously used gene editing technology. As of right now, scientists have been researching possible solutions as to how to solve the shortage of organs by using CRISPR. One solution involves xenotransplantation, which is when organs from one species are transplanted into another. Another solution involves growing full and working human organs in animals using human stem cells and sheep embryos. And we're going to get more into xenotransplantation in the next slide. So like I said, the xenotransplantation is using tissues from one organ or from one species to another. And although pigs are good candidates, pigs have a long history of providing medicinals, and therefore it's no surprise that they make good candidates for this. They make great candidates to conduct the solution for the shortage of organs. Their size and structure and the similarity of their organs also help out with this. Although pigs are good candidates, there is a large phylogenetic difference which can cause many immune-related issues after transplants. As a solution, genetic editing and CRISPR are being used to take out the genes that would cause the complications after transplant. Scientists at the Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute have managed to keep a genetically altered pig heart alive inside a baboon's body. And they put the heart into the baboon to test the immune response to the pig's heart. This is just one of a few studies that are seeking a possible solution.
Another solution that scientists are working on is finding ways to grow embryos of different species, to grow embryos with human stem cells of different species to grow working human organs inside the said species. Today, we're going to be looking at a Japanese scientist who has been approved to test the first, to test the first human stem cells and animal embryos, sorry if I butcher the name completely, but Hiromitsu Nakauchi first plans to grow human stem cells into live rats and then later transplant into different species. He ultimately wants to be able to grow organs inside of animals to later transplant inside of people. In 2010, Nakauchi and his team are transplanted insulin-producing mice pancreas tissue that he grew from a rat, which successfully cured diabetes inside of mice. The American Association of Science in Austin is currently working on developing sheep chimeras, which will hopefully create sheep with fully transplantable human organs and later transplant these into humans.
A fun fact about chimeras are that they're actually a hybrid between two genetically distinct type of cells, which was actually adopted from Greek mythology, which is this monster type of looking thing here, which is basically a lion, goat, and snake combined.
All right, so for our activity today, we have a scenario that we want you to imagine. So I'll read it out. At a showcasing of new possible technologies that may be introduced into the medical world, one showing involves the use of pig organs being substituted for human organs to possibly solve the shortage of organs. The researcher explains that CRISPR genome editing can genetically alter pig organs to become similar to human organs. So far, humans have not been tested, but as of right now, scientists are transplanting these genetically altered pig organs into monkeys, specifically baboons. So, what might be some reactions given from certain groups of people? Each group will play a specific role in breakout rooms. You will discuss how your role might alter what you think about the new technology, as well as the concerns that come with use of genome editing in the scenario. Even though we've done the activity with other interns during the deep dive, unfortunately, we cannot do this activity with the audience today because the breakout rooms are unavailable for the event. But we still will be showing the concerns that each role might play. These roles would contain doctor, patient in need of transplant, animal rights activists, and a person of religion. So for the concerns and the position of a doctor, some questions that would be asked, like shown, would be who would be given the approval to test these new organs, and how would they determine who gets the organ first? So obviously, considering the short of organs, and you want to kind of think about as a doctor, like the organization of how you would give this out to people and the risk and whatnot. For a patient in need of transplant, some concerns would be, will I get any deadly diseases from the pig organs? And does the pig organ work as sufficiently as human organ? So, I mean, even though patients with the in need of transplant are somewhat desperate considering the shortage, it's also can be a risk when having an organ that's not from a human being put into you. So, obviously, you would need to consider the risk. As an animal rights activist, some concerns would be, is it right to alter an animal's genetics? And are there solutions that don't involve killing off even more animals? That's kind of self-explanatory. A lot of it has to do with the rights for animals and how if we're abusing our power by um, basically harming these animals and their species and whatnot, maybe even extinction, depending on the different types of animals in use. And for the last perspective, a person of religion, some religions don't like eating pork or meat. For example, Muslims consider the pig to be unclean. Will they be okay with having a pig organ inside of them? Are there possible alternatives besides a pig? Besides Muslim, I know also Hinduism, they have a lot of concerns with organs from a pig and some other species, as the animal seems to be unclean or discussing in certain ways in the perspective of the religion. So, considering that eating is similar to having an organ put into you, either way, you're having a piece of the animal being put into you. You have to consider the different perspectives of religion.
I guess we'll do the takeaways. My takeaway from this entire deep dive was that I've learned that working in groups isn't the same as it was in elementary or middle school, where either one person did all the work and everyone else laid back in class, or how it used to be. And then I also learned more about how to like speak up in a group and trying to get my ideas across instead of just doing it myself or having someone else do it. I've also lost the fear of asking questions when I don't know something, because I used to fear that, and I was always scared of being wrong.
I would say that my biggest takeaway from this whole experience was how important communication truly is, especially when it comes to working in teams. I would say that would have to be the biggest challenge we faced. It was hard to find times when we were all available to work, but I think we overcame it and we all presented something that we're proud to share with you guys. And I think something I learned during this whole internship was how to take initiative, which is something I really did lack before entering this internship. And I just want to thank everybody for giving us this opportunity. And thank you to Nadine and Robin for everything they taught us.
From this experience, I feel like I gained a lot of communication skills and a real whole new perspective on law, medicine, and the environment through the genetic field. It definitely sparked my interest in genetics and how it can be used in the world around me. And um, besides that, specific to the deep dive, I definitely learned a lot of skills that have to do with online use of being in groups. Working in groups is definitely easier in person, I feel like, especially when it comes to communicating and getting things done. And like Jocelyn said, we all have different responsibilities, so having to coordinate how we would complete the project depending on how the different things that we're doing. That's outside of the deep dive. It was kind of difficult, but I feel like we did accomplish it well. So I like to thank the team for contributing their ideas and communicating daily about the project. And I would also like to thank Robin and Nadine for their consistent support and learning about genetics and overall developing our presentation.
Thank you. You all did a really great job. Very good. So we are a little bit ahead of schedule by about 10 minutes, but we had planned to be taking like a 5-minute break now. I think we'd still go ahead with that plan. Our next group that is coming up after the break is going to be talking about genome editing and the environment. And their presentation is actually mostly done through a Kahoot. And so it's very interactive. And they're going to go ahead and share their screen during the break so that those of you who are live on the Zoom call here can join the Kahoot and be ready to participate when they get going, when we come back. So it's like, yeah, it's 47. No, we're in a different time zone here. So like, should we come back at like 8 till? Or do you want to round it off something like so?
Round it off.
10:55.
10:55.
Yeah. 10:55. 5 till. Yes.
Okay, we will come back at 5 till, and then the genome editing and the environment team, if you want to go ahead and share your screen with the Kahoot on there, then people can get connected.
Awesome.
Okay, on my clock, it looks like it's 5 till. So is everyone from the genome editing and the environment team here? Diana, Yash, Alejandra, and Ane?
While we're waiting for the teams and everybody to hopefully join back with their cameras switch back on. So we're sharing this Kahoot. The next group will be presenting through Kahoot. So take a moment to log in so you can join in and see their presentation in its full glory, so to speak.
Nadine, my team is here.
Okay.
Sorry for stop sharing. Before we move on into the formal introductions, I would just like to go over like what our Kahoot is going to be. So for those of you who haven't played Kahoot, it's really just an assortment of different questions. And we also threw in some informational slides. We would also appreciate it if at times when we ask people to share their opinions, if you guys can unmute yourself, and we would really appreciate that. For those of you who didn't have a chance to log in, I'll drop the link as well as the ID in the chat. So as we're introducing ourselves, you can still go in and do that. Without further ado, Ane, could you start us off, please?
Yeah, so hey everyone, we're the Genome Editing and Environment team. I'm Ane Patel, I'm 17 years old. I'm a soon-to-be senior attending Warren High School. And I chose this deep dive because I was interested in potential career options in the field of medicine. So a deep dive involving the use of genetics kind of interested me. I was particularly intrigued by the technological aspect behind genetics, as well as its ethical and social implications.
Hi, I'm Zaya Serrano. I'm a rising senior at Warren High School, and I chose the PG deep dive because it intrigued me how, and during the introductions when Robin was explaining it, it didn't sound purely medical, but more of a community engagement. And that's kind of like the aspect that really sparked my interest. And I see myself working in the political realm, and I believe this was the perfect example of how to reach out to a community on a topic they may not be aware of.
Hi, my name is Alejandra Pelayo. I'm 17 and I'm an incoming senior at Downey High School. One of the biggest reasons why I chose this deep dive in particular was because genetics has always been a personal interest of mine. I feel like I get to experience it every day with the people I get to meet. Not only are people different personality-wise, but their DNA is also different, with the exception of identical twins. I also felt that this would be a great opportunity for me to see what a career in this field may look like, so I can get a better idea as to what I might want to do in college.
Hi, my name is Yash Bhagat, and I am going into my senior year attending Warren High School, pursuing the engineering pathway. So I'm most interested in biomedical and biomechanical engineering, making this deep dive pique my interest. I want to learn more about gene editing in the future, making a career out of that field, but overall, this seemed like one of the best deep dives for me to fit into.
And then I'll share my screen now so you guys can see the Kahoot.
I have a question. We have someone from YouTube asking if they can also join the Kahoot. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody can join with the link.
So please join us if you're watching live. This is our opportunity to get feedback from those of you watching. So thanks.
Okay, thank you so much for everybody who Thank you so much for everybody who logged on. This is our Kahoot on GMOs.
Okay, so first question, what does GMO stand for? So the correct answer was actually genetically modified organisms. I just wanted to add on that a key distinction between GMOs and other forms of genetic engineering is that genetic material from foreign organisms is actually inserted into the organism being genetically modified, which is a way to see if a modified organism is considered a GMO. So yeah, next.
So what are GMOs? Okay, so yeah, GMOs are organisms whose genes have been modified through various methods that we will get to later. And this can be for purposes like providing superior growth or more nutrition.
The history behind GMOs. Believe it or not, the basics of editing plants has been around for centuries. Around the 1860s, Gregor Mendel has been attributed to the invention of crossbreeding with different strains of pea plants. He was able to predict the traits of incoming pea plants. From that point on, plants and animals can be bred or for selective needs. Fast forward to the 1950s, the discovery of DNA was finally made. Soon after, in 1973, came the invention of genetically modifying organisms from Herbert Boyer and Stanley Cohn. The need for GMOs came from the growing population of the world and needing a solution coming to feed those people. The goal is to create faster growing and more nutritious food. According to the FDA, GMOs have been introduced to the market since the 1990s. Such crops hit the market including squash, soybeans, cotton, corn, papayas, tomatoes, and even potatoes.
Okay, how long have GMOs been around? And your options are 5 to 10 years, 10 to 20 years, less than 5 years, and more than 25 years. So the answer was more than 25 years. As Zayana mentioned previously, GMOs were marketed toward consumers in the 90s. And a fun fact is one of the first genetically modified crops were tomatoes. So let's get into how humans affect how plants grow. Many people have a common misconception with GMOs and the way that food is cultivated. One of the most evident examples is with bananas. So on the right hand, in the picture, you can see that on the right hand side, there is a very small banana and it's full of seeds and it looks not very edible compared to the one on the left hand side. Some may argue that the one on the left hand side has been genetically modified just because it looks so much more fruitful, but that's actually not the case. What happened was that this is known as the Cavendish banana, and over time it mutated to be the way it is now. Unfortunately, with those mutations, it is sterile. So essentially, it can't reproduce. And one of the questions you think of is like, well, why is it not extinct? Because I'm sure that most of us see these bananas in our supermarket. Well, the reason being is that the humans actually affect the way that they're cultivated. So since the bananas can't reproduce on their own, what they do is when they plant it, they take sprouts from the stem and replant them. And this is actually known as the process of cloning. So you're actually eating cloned bananas. Pretty interesting, huh?
Okay, so next question. How can crops be genetically modified? So the correct answer is all of the above. So knowing which traits the crops can obtain from being genetically modified is actually super important because the first step in the process of producing these GMOs involves scientists identifying a trait of interest for the plants to have. So yeah.
How did GMOs make you feel at the moment? So I just want to remind everyone that you could multi-select, but you have to press enter. So for those who pressed concerned, I just wanted to ask why you chose your answer, if you're willing to say. If not, for those who put against them, I would like to, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. For those who said that they're against GMOs, why would, for that answer?
And just as a reminder, please know that all your opinions are validated. You may some people may not share them, but this is, as again, a reminder, we want to start the conversation, so everybody's voice matters.
I think you always hear of organic being the best and the fruit that you should go for. So anytime I hear GMOs, I'd always think maybe I shouldn't eat it because I didn't really know how they were made, so I thought they were processed. So I didn't think they were good. But yeah, that's pretty much what I've learned so far.
Yeah, it's understandable. It's not necessarily something that's considered in the media a lot often as much. And as for people who are for them, why choose that answer?
I kind of said for because like of the food problem in the world. Like there's a lot of starving people, and GMOs like how they could like help produce bigger food yields, and that could maybe potentially reduce hunger in the world. So that's what I was thinking about, is bigger yields of food.
That's definitely a good point, especially if we're talking specifically in California. It's oftentimes hard to grow crops here because, we're more prone to drought, and some of these GMOs have allowed us to inhibit produce that is drought resistant, so they need less water to grow. Is there anybody else that wants to share their opinion on this question?
Yeah, I put concern because although this has been here for years, I'm pretty sure it's still being altered as time passes. And we don't know if it's ever going to become more harmful or like harmful in any type of way.
Yeah, it's really important to keep in mind. Later on in the Kahoot, we'll go over the consequences, but it's important to keep in mind not only the benefits, but also how it may be harmed and whether it's something so alarming and concerning to the public that they may need to have a recall. Thank you for all of those who have shared. I'm going to move on to the next question.
So one of the steps in the process of producing GMOs involves isolating the section of DNA with the trait in the foreign organism. So basically, what they do with that trait is they insert it into the plant seeds. So there are a variety of methods to both remove and insert the traits. So scientists typically like to use enzymes to cut foreign organisms' DNA with the selected trait to isolate it. And to insert the genetic material, some scientists like to use what are called gene guns. They're 22 caliber guns that shoot metal particles coated with genetic material into plant tissue. They might also use bacteria injected with this section of DNA. What that will do is that the bacteria will inject its own genetic material along with the section of DNA into the plant seed. A newer method involves the use of CRISPR. So there are a variety of ways to utilize CRISPR. So depending on how it's used, it can actually be used to create GMOs. So this newer technology can precisely insert sections of DNA into plants. This leads to very accurate results without needing to do multiple trials, unlike the other methods.
What are some negatives regarding GMOs?
Although the increase of antibiotic resistance and the increase of allergies is not a huge side effect, since GMOs are usually tested more than non-GMO plants, problems can still arise. As for killing a species, they come as unintended consequences, such as a prime example is the elimination of milkweeds led to the decrease of the monarch butterfly population by 90%.
So some negative aspects of GMOs. So availability is a big concern. For example, Monsanto is a company dedicated to genetic modification of seeds, and they bought most of its competitors, and which led to less people having access and less companies having access to GMOs, and that's not good. Also, the average cost to make these GMOs and fabricate them is $135 million in USD, which is a lot considering that there's other ways that it could be cheaper. And also, these GMOs, they're usually sprayed with herbicides and pesticides to keep bugs off. And since they're resistant to it, this can sometimes lead to health concerns for human consumption.
So next question, who should own GMOs? This is another multi-select question, so be sure to press submit after selecting your answer. And it's opinion based, so there's no right or wrong answer. So there's no right or wrong answer, but we're not trying to influence anyone's opinions or anything like that. But if we could have some people unmute themselves or say something in the chat box as to what your guys' reasoning was or why you guys chose an answer, that'd be greatly appreciated.
Can the people who solicited all people should have access to genetically modified organisms share their reasoning, please?
If people want to use GMOs, they should have the option to, and they should have like control over whether it's in their food or not.
That's a really good point. I think but I think it's also important to keep in mind like how costly it would take, because as Yash described earlier, it's $135 million to develop the trait as well as go through the FDA process. So it's also you also want to market it towards consumers where it's affordable for everybody to purchase. So you really want to emphasize that entire idea of inclusivity. Does anybody want to share why they chose that GMO should be owned by the companies that created them? I'm sharing from my own opinion. I think that this one can be kind of tricky because sometimes you can run into legal issues with company. However, they do have a right to own some extent of their GMOs, in my opinion, just because they were the ones who created it. So that's also something else to keep in mind. Did anybody else come up with something else that they want to share?
I also kind of agree with this one because since they are the ones who created it, they do know most about it. So they should have the right to own it.
Absolutely. And I think right now we're in a position where companies tend to be the ones that own the majority of GMOs. As Yash had mentioned earlier, Monsanto actually bought out most of its competitors. So it kind of limits the spectrum as to who owns them. And so we can see that for right now, most in today's world, usually companies are the ones to own them. Before we move on, is there anybody else who wants to share their opinion on this one? Okay, thank you so much for those of you who have shared. We really appreciate all your feedback and responses.
So who first created GMOs? Okay, so the concept of gene editing has been around for longer, but modern GMO technology came about in 1973 by Herbert Boyer. He also had a partner with him, Stanley Cohen, and they're both actually Nobel Peace Prize scientists. And yeah.
Last question, and this is another multi-select. In your opinion, do you think that GMOs are safe? Just as a reminder, since it is multi-select, you have to click submit after you choose your option. And the options are, I agree, I am not sure, I disagree, and I need more information. Okay, thank you for your answers. Can someone unmute themselves and explain why they would need more information? Or just anybody who wants to share what they chose, whether it was agree or you're not sure.
I need to know more about the process of how it's made to like fully answer the question if it's safe or not.
Yeah, that's definitely a really good point to bring up. Anae went over some of the processes, but again, it's still GMO, since they barely got marketed to consumers in the 90s, it's still something very experimental. And it's also important to keep in mind that while there are risks, even though the risks are limited, they're still existent, and you can't guarantee whether each lab is following all the procedures necessary to safely implement these GMOs. But otherwise, yeah, those are really important things to keep in mind, and probably something that you would need to look for more information. The only thing that's really important is to know that GMOs tend to have a bad reputation because of the media. So it's really important that you fact check your sources and make sure you're getting the right information. Would anybody else like to unmute themselves and share their reasoning behind why they chose a particular answer?
I think because there's so many factors that could tie in to determine if they're safe or not. That's why I chose I'm not sure. And I think I would need more information.
Yeah, I think, well, for the purpose of this group, we weren't able to cover as much as we wanted to. So we definitely encourage, if you guys have an interest in this afterwards, to just look up more information that maybe you're not sure about, or any more questions that you may have. Thank you so much for the people who unmuted themselves. We really appreciate your answers. Congratulations to everybody who made it on the podium, and thank you for the rest of you that participated. Anae, would you like to start us off with your personal experience?
Yeah, so during this internship, I was able to learn more about how to manage my time properly, which will definitely help me in the future when I enter college and eventually enter the workforce. Something else important that I learned from this internship is the value of communication. I know it's been said multiple times, but because honestly, communication was the reason that ultimately helped us finish our project. We all had super busy schedules, so being able to communicate with each other was an important skill for us to learn if we wanted to, get some work done. Lastly, I got to experience what it felt like to work with people I'm not entirely familiar with. Uh, this definitely helped me develop better communication skills. So overall, although we all had like pretty busy schedules, I'm so glad we were able to get this project done and learn some new skills along the way.
I had a really great experience at this internship. I think that as my first job, I learned a lot of abilities and skills that I previously didn't have. And again, I'm going to reiterate the importance of communication within my team, because like Anae said, that's ultimately what helped us get our project done. And I think it was so much more important in this type of work environment that's non-traditional. It's kind of harder to develop those workplace connections with people. without seeing them in person. So we relied a lot on texting each other, calling, and Zooming so that we could cooperate and get our work done. And I think that one of the other really great skills that I learned was just to have self-confidence. I think Nadine and Robin, I really appreciated them as my mentors, especially because like coming from being quarantined for so long and not interacting with people, new people, it was really daunting to not only present in front of you guys, but also present in front of my mentors and bosses. But Nadine and Robin really did an amazing job in creating an environment where I was always comfortable asking questions. And over the course of our meetings, I felt more comfortable talking to everybody. So I really appreciate that. And I just want to say thank you to June for giving me this opportunity. This not only has helped me develop those skills that I mentioned, but also given me a great amount of independence. To me, a job has always symbolized independence. And I feel like it was more difficult. It would have been more difficult for me to go out and get one now that we're in quarantine. So thank you so much for taking a chance on me.
To just kind of continue that, my experience with the internship was beyond belief amazing. Since day one, I love the dynamic between Nadine and Robin, and it kind of let a sense of comfort in the group and allowed for discussions no matter what your opinion was on the topics being taught. Also, I believe a lot of the groups also agree that no matter what question we had with Nadine or Robin, they were there to help, especially with the time difference. It was amazing. And this program really allowed me to continue learning about communication with groups, especially it's hard during a pandemic. And it allowed me to also explore a different field that has never really been in my comfort zone, and has allowed me to even take a bioethics class. So that was nice. Time was definitely a challenge. My entire group is filled with brilliant kids and really hard work schedules. So it was definitely a hassle to get a group together, but I feel like we really pulled through with something amazing. I would also like to say a thank you to June as well. It's hard to find an internship, let alone virtually, and this experience has been amazing ever since January, and thank you.
Yeah, to elaborate on everything, that my experience throughout this internship was really good. I learned a lot, like how to collaborate properly, but the virtual meetings were kind of weird for me in a group because I'm usually used to working in person. And also, I learned about work ethic. So after COVID, I got really lazy. I was not that motivated to learn, but like this internship actually gave me something that I wanted to work on, and it helped me become more efficient at work. And but overall, this deep dive, it seemed really fun. And the idea that I had a great experience working with my teammates and the project in general. And thank you, June, Robin, Nadine, for your time and helping us with opportunities like this and motivating us to learn about something we may have never knew about. And thank you.
Awesome. Thank you all. That was a really great presentation. I appreciate that you introduced me to Kahoot. I've heard about it, but like your presentation was like my first interactive experience of it. And I think I will find ways to use it in the future. I really like the interactivity of it and that sort of thing. And I appreciate all the work you guys put into doing your topic as well. Okay, I think we are down to the final topic of the day. So it's another one of our smaller groups. Catherine, Cameron, and Alexis chose to focus their topic on the area of genetics and athletics. So with the Olympics going on, I know a lot of people have sports on the brain. And so our genetics and athletics group is going to talk to you about a few different genes that have been implicated in athletic performance.
All right, hello everybody. My name's Catherine and I'm an incoming senior at Downey High School. I chose the genetics and athletics deep dive specifically because I'm an athlete. I grew up with many years of dance experience. I'm also a dance teacher now and I'm also in marching band, which takes a lot more physical activity than people may anticipate.
Hi, I'm Alexis, and I picked this deep dive because I was really interested in athletics and I'm also an athlete, and I thought it would be a great opportunity to learn more about it. And yeah, so far it's pretty good.
Hi, I'm Cameron, and I chose to focus on genetics and athletics. Like Catherine said, I'm a dancer, I'm a competitive dancer, and I'm on my high school dance team. And I just thought it would be really interesting to learn more about what I'm doing with my body every single day.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share screen for our presentation. Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the Genetics and Athletics presentation. I'm Catherine Simon, and along with my teammates Cameron Tomas and Alexis Santillan, we are going to go ahead and talk about, are athletes really at a fair advantage? All right, so to introduce things, through this presentation, we'll be looking at two genes linked to athletic performance, actin N3 and ACE. Then we will compare the significance of actin N3 and ACE to factors like environment, training, etc. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Alexis.
What is actin 3? Actin 3 gene is programmed to make a protein called alpha actin 3.
Wait, Alexis, I'm sorry. Can you be closer to your mic or speak louder? It's hard to hear.
Is that fine?
It's a little bit better. I don't know for others. Can you hear Alexis okay? Sorry. Okay, go for it.
Okay, thank you. This protein is mainly found in fast twitch fibers. Fast twitch fibers use a lot of very quickly. Therefore, actin gene is commonly referred as a gene for speed. All people have actin 3 protein, different variants. The two most common variants are X variant and R variant. An X variant is usually, or you can tell by having an X variant is by having a parent that's an X variant can identify what, like, if both parents have X variant, both, sorry, let me read that. If both parents have X variants, most likely their child will be an X variant. And R variant, if both parents have an R variant, their child most likely will have an R variant. An X variant gene is no longer produces an actin 3 protein. Then the X variant is linked to endurance. So endurance activities could include long distance, swimming, and cycling. The R variant of the gene does produce an actin 3 protein. And R variant is linked to sprints and strength. So sprinting, burpees, and quick lateral movement. What is the difference when it comes to injury of R and X variant? Different actin genotypes can identify whether you're injury prone. Studies have shown that R variant carriers have a less chance of getting injured than those that are X variant carriers. Since an X variant carriers include endurance and use up a lot of intense training, and it's most likely due to like overuse of the muscle and the way the structure or the way of the variants structured throughout their body. What does it mean for athletes? Non-professional athletes have a significant disadvantage when it comes to a certain sport. That could include if someone that's in an R variant that's in an endurance sport and has an R variant, it doesn't mean that they're at a disadvantage. If they put in the time and the effort, they will most likely surpass someone that's an X variant. no matter what genotype you carry, you have an athletic advantage one way or another.
Okay, hello everybody. Sorry for the mishap. It's really hard because the mouse pad is very sensitive. But I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the ACE gene. So to start, the definition of the ACE gene. The ACE gene is a regulatory gene that plays a huge role in maintaining blood pressure, salt levels, and bodily fluids, which means it has a huge impact on the cardiovascular and endocrine systems. So there are two variations of the ACE gene. One of them is the insertion allele, which is linked to improved performance in endurance activities like long distance running and long dance routines. However, there's also the deletion allele, which is associated with brief strength and power activities like sprints and gymnastic stunts. But the commonality between both of the alleles is that they have an influence on bradykinin levels in the blood. What is bradykinin? Bradykinin is a molecule that is responsible for dilations in the arteries. Why does this matter in athletes? Bradykinin levels are a crucial factor in athletic endurance during physical activity windows. Okay, so here's a bradykinin study on the ACE gene. So to start, going over to my image on the left, there was a study done on 115 men and women and found that the B2R gene was the most commonly found gene in elite athletes. This means that the B2R gene has more blood pressure and cardiovascular inflammation control as seen on the image in the right. So because the B2R gene is most commonly found in elite athletes, but not in all elite athletes, the real social question is whether or not this poses an unfair opportunity for athletes competing against others who might be at a genetic advantage. The environment also has a huge effect on what kind of athlete a person can become. So factors such as air pressure, elevation, temperature, and humidity can also affect an athlete's performance greatly. Heat exchange between an athlete and their environment can either increase or decrease hypo or hypothermia and overall performance. So we made an interactive slide for everybody, which is also tied to a poll. And it's more of a statement that I'm going to ask you guys to agree, disagree, etc. with. And it starts with, if I knew the effect of ACE and actin in 3 and was an elite athlete, I would want to get myself and my competitors genetically tested for fair competition.
A few more seconds for anybody else who wants to vote.
Okay, so would anybody who chose neutral like to speak up and voice their opinions?
I put neutral just because I think I would want to know more information. For example, I think it kind of leads into the idea like how much hard work can a person do, but will genetics outshine that hard work and therefore give the people with better genetics an unfair advantage? And I think if that was to be deemed like fair competition, I would want to know more about that.
That is great input, especially because we're actually going to go a little bit more into it for the last 2 slides. Would anybody who chose, I don't think anybody chose disagree actually. If somebody did, would they like to speak up, or anybody who chose anything other than neutral?
you might not be seeing the results. It looks like 3 people chose disagree and 2 people chose agree. So.
Okay, well, go ahead and move on to the next slides.
Okay, so I will be focusing on the external factors, like Alejandra mentioned, on how they play a role in athletic performance. So one main factor that plays a role in athletic performance is location. This can be what sports and what athletic activities are popular in the area, or what training facilities that an individual may have access to based on where they are. And another thing that location can affect is coaching, and what coaches that individuals can have access to. And then their coaches can also play a role on their skill level and how well they can perform in their said sport. Another factor that plays a role is money. Athletics and athletic activities, sports can be a very huge financial commitment, meaning that it can affect how much training they can afford, what kind of sport they can afford, etc. And the last one that we came up with is time. Not only is weekly and daily time commitments are a thing for sports, but also how long their athletic career lasts, because some sports and some athletes train and compete for longer periods of time than others because of the demands of their sport. And here are some scenarios to leave you to wonder whether or not genetics really does play that big of a role in your athletic performance. So an individual with the X variant of actinin 3 may have stronger endurance from a genetic viewpoint, but their competition who has the R variant, which can be deemed as the less favored variant of the gene, could have better access to better coaches and training facilities, allowing them to have more opportunity to strengthen their endurance through training rather than their genetics. So this leaves you to question, does the person with the favored gene really have an advantage over the person with better opportunity and better access to better training facilities? And the last one, a gymnast who has been training for 12 years has the D allele of ACE, meaning that from a genetic viewpoint, they will have an advantage when it comes to events requiring strength and power, such as vault. Their competition has the I allele, which can be deemed as the less favored variant. And they have been training for 20 years and focusing majority of their training on vault for the past 5 years. So this leaves you to question, does the person with the favored gene have an advantage over the person who has been training for a longer period of time?
All right, and that concludes our presentation. Thank you for listening to our input on genetics and athletics and how much genes actually affect an athlete in the long run. I guess I'm gonna go ahead and share my experience with this internship. I want to start by saying that it was really good. I really, really liked working with Nadine and Robin. I was a little bit scared at first because I knew that it was a Harvard internship, so I didn't know if I was going to be like intimidated by anything, but it was quite the opposite of that. The energy in our internship was really comfortable. I learned so much, not only about genetics, but also about teamwork, leadership, communication. And I'd really like to thank Robin, Nadine, and June, of course, for giving me this opportunity because it was truly awesome.
My biggest takeaway through the internship was that we had some struggles throughout the process, and we surpassed those struggles. And some of the things that I've learned or plan on learning to go forward as a better person is that communication and just like just being a team player through through the group, I guess. And I just want to say thank you.
My experience, I really enjoyed this internship. I feel that it taught me a lot of valuable lessons and skills that I can carry on with me throughout my future, whether it's how to prepare for an interview, collaboration skills, communication skills, all of that. I feel like I learned a lot through this internship, and I'd like to thank Robin, Nadine, and June for giving me this opportunity.
All right. Well, thank you all. Hey, Catherine, do you want to stop sharing your screen? We'll be able to see everyone. Thank you. That's it. All of our groups have done their showcases. I'm really proud of you all. And I know like the tons of hours of work that went into putting all these projects together. Like Nadine said at the beginning, you know, this kind of work, this is the kind of thing that we do every day. And it's not easy work. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of research, and it takes a lot of, you know, spending time to get the wording just right and make sure that, you know, you're handling all of these sometimes difficult, controversial issues in a way that is respectful and that, you know, brings in everyone's voices, because I think oftentimes people feel that they are left out of the conversation, and that's what this work is all about, is making more people feel like they have a place at the table and that people want to hear their voice and want to know all the opinions that are out there. And like I said, it's not easy, and you guys have done a really great job of walking that line and kind of figuring out how to do that. No way I could have done it as a high schooler. I can tell you that for sure. So I really, I mean, personally, I have enjoyed working with all of you. I think this has been a really great experience for both me and Nadine, but proud of you all.
So I guess we have our last moments together for any questions from the audience. So if all participants can have their videos on as much as possible so we can see your faces for the last bit. But if there's anybody in the audience who has a question for our interns, go ahead.
Question. So I've been asking other interns, other showcases, what surprised you about you during this internship?
See a lot of thinking faces. Anybody feel free to unmute yourself or write in chat.
I think that I surprised myself during the internship with just my willingness to take initiative. Usually, because I haven't worked in groups as often because of the pandemic, so much of my work has been individual in school. So, like for me to be taking a more proactive role in my group, I was really surprised at that.
I think something that surprised me, especially I remember Anae was saying like this like whole entire COVID thing really kind of like made me kind of unmotivated to continue like going on and like pursuing educational things. But this internship, like I was really surprised how engaged I was in my project. Like I knew I was gonna care about it, but like it really like I was like consumed with it pretty much. Like I was so in a good way. Like it was pretty much like these past few weeks, it was like my driving force to like, so we could get to this point and finish it, but have a good project. I wasn't okay with just having a mediocre thing. I wanted to be really good.
Having high standards is so valuable. I definitely feel like Robin and Nadine held you all to high standards.
We tried, for sure. I think they definitely lived up to it. I see that Barb left a question in the chat. She asked, did any of you change your minds about any of these topics?
I think I really liked the genetics and athletics one, but honestly, the crime industry sounded so interesting. I think also because at the beginning of the internship, we learned about the histories of genetics and how they started to influence crime. I also wanted to add on to the previous statement about like high standards, because I definitely think that they held us to high standards in a really good way. Like I worked on this project in Utah and in Vegas and in Downey. So it was really good. I was able to do it.
That's amazing, and a testament to being in a remote setting, being virtual. That's awesome, Catherine. We've also learned maybe calling on people. If I call on you, Nicholas, would you be okay?
Yeah, I'd be okay. You want me to answer
Your
your
question. Yes, the surprise one, or change your mind about any of the topics.
the topics one, but I really liked what the genome editing and health team did, and I feel like I really could have also done great in that project as well. But at the same time, I also feel like everything kind of happens for a reason, and I found myself within genetics and health, and I wouldn't trade that for anything.
But I mean, like, what I meant, and let me clarify, is almost like, did you come into it with a certain belief or understanding about any of the subjects, and through learning more about it and having the discussion, go to another corner, so to speak, and the four corners, or really change your mind about that? Yeah, and now you're like, that's what I mean.
Okay, yeah. No, yeah, I definitely have changed my mind on a bunch of these topics. I kind of came in with like an empty canvas, and like I was really open to learn like these different opinions and the actual research that goes behind it. And at the end, from now and 6 weeks ago, I do have completely different opinions about some of these topics.
I'm also curious, have you shared what you have learned about genetics with anybody? So Catherine, who?
Actually, so one of the first days that we had meetings was the day that I was gonna go get my hair cut. So I told like my hairdresser all about like the genetic, I think it was called Better Genes for Kansas. Something like that. But it was one of the methods that people use to try to like genetically like classify people. And I thought it was super interesting, and I felt so smart because I was like listing all these cool things to her, and it was really fun. So definitely shared a lot of these things.
Yeah, so I work with a surgeon. I shadow him, and he was asking, how everything's going, and I mentioned this internship, and I mentioned genetics and health and psychology and what our project is, and it was scary to say the least to explain something like this to an actual medical professional. But I got through it, and he enjoyed what we're doing.
I think I saw Roxana nodding as well. Did you talk with some people about it?
Yeah, definitely. I know my family has a history of like doing like being interested in genetics because we have Alzheimer's run through our family, and it was definitely interesting some of the things that I learned, and I got to share with my family some of the fun facts. I think my favorite topic that we talked about was definitely eugenics. That was very interesting. Um, on how, when we think eugenics, it's like somebody is genetically better than somebody else. And the history of it, especially here in the US, is just something that, you know, it's in the past, but you don't really think that some of the implications from that could still be around today. And just to learn that sometimes stuff like that still goes on was definitely a little bit worrying, to say the least.
for part of this internship, I was in Mexico, and over there in Mexico, my family owns a ranch, and my uncle is studying to be an environmental engineer. So while we were over there, he was writing his thesis statement, and we were just having conversations about how people, the difference between like how people affect the way that things grow, the different methods to farming. And then I was introducing it, the idea of like, yeah, people are starting to insert genes into produce. And he was really just interested in the idea.
Anyone else have questions? John, do you have any questions or comments?
I think Nadine's words from the very beginning keep echoing in my head, and that is just incredibly impressive. All of the different presentations here and the learnings that have taken place with our interns over the course of the last 4 to 6 weeks. Really, really impressive.
I wanted to thank everyone for this, and Nadine and Robin, we have talked about this many times over the past. I feel like we started this when I saw you, Robin, and I was. So actually, I'm curious for you, Robin and Nadine. What did you think going in, and what did you get? I mean, like, where you what did you expect, and then like now, right now, like.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, this has been a long topic. I mean, we're seeing each other in person. That has been some time since we first brought up the idea of doing this. And I think from the very beginning, it was just challenging to think like, okay, so we know we have like this limited amount of time, and how in that limited amount of time, like Nadine said, we can't even like pull together a lesson in the amount of time that these interns had to. And so it's like in these short like 4 weeks, we have to quickly like introduce you to like all of these topics related to like genetics and society, and then you have to like find one that you're interested in, and you have to do some research, you have to put together this project, and you also have to learn how to like facilitate a discussion and learn how to present things in a way that's not trying to sway anyone's opinion, but is just inviting people in. That's a heavy lift, you know. And so I think going into it, like I was even nervous, like we haven't done this before. It felt very much like we were building the plane as we were flying it. But I think everyone was a good sport about it, and we all learned a lot together. It was challenging, I think, for everyone involved. It was hard work on all fronts. But I mean, I feel super proud of the projects that all of the groups were able to put together. And I know it took a lot of work. So
yeah, super impressive. I learned new things for sure. So I know, Nicholas, you were saying like it was daunting to talk to a surgeon, but you might be surprised. You might have learned some new stuff from you. Like, you've become your own experts on your topics, and I was super excited to hear that you're also sharing with others outside this internship. But yeah, I can only echo Robin's words. I'm really, really impressed with the work you put in, but also just the people that you are. Like all of you worked hard. It was fun to hang out, hard work, but I am going to miss all the time that we spent together. And I hope to hear from you in the future, and please do stay in touch. If you're going, moving on to other things, I'm curious just to hear what comes next. And if you need any help or advice from me, and I'm guessing for Robin, it will be the same, like, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and always happy to chat. But yeah, thank you so much for the hard work you put in. It's been super impressive, and I'm so glad we get to do the showcase and everybody can see your hard work, because it deserves to be in the spotlight.
I just wanted to thank both of you for all of it, because when we talked about it, we weren't really sure what it was going to be like, and you do have such incredibly high standards with regard to it is such a fine line of not trying to be persuasive on either And that's something, so just for everyone to know, Bea Group has been working collaboratively with PG Ed for a number of years on different grant projects that are funded by NSF, NIH. And so Barb and I have been so fortunate to be able to go to workshops where they have been working with different people in the communities and different educators. And so the experience that you had with regard to getting deeper into specific topics, we actually have done that ourselves. And but that was over several days just to learn topics. So so when Robin said that it was a really, really short period of time, like we actually have some context with regard to that. And Barb and I did not have to create something that we then had to share publicly, so we just wanted to acknowledge that that was huge, and to congratulate all of you on just all of the knowledge you gained, as well as being able to really be able to share it in a very professional and well-informed, poised way that really allows people to make their own decisions. It's all about being informed. And so you really provided a lot of information that helped the audience, because we saw in the feedback, even on YouTube, across the chat here, that a lot of people were learning this information for the first time. And so it's really exciting. And I wanted to thank each and every one of you for all of your hard work. And to Robin and Nadine, we definitely know, we feel it also. It's a labor of love. We definitely want each and every one of you the interns. We do this. We have folks that we've invited to be deep dive leads because of the similarities of core values of why we do this work. And so thank you for putting your hearts, Nadine and Robin, into this, and really just they before you jumped onto the Zoom, we were asking, well, how was it? And they were like, Robin and Nadine were available to us, even with the time difference. They were always there to give us feedback, and we just really want to thank you. We want to thank all the interns. And so I'm going to actually stop the live stream. And so just thank everyone. I do want to make a plug for our next deep dive showcase, which is about building skateboards. And so that one is in a little bit. It's at 12:30. We will be back on YouTube. And then later this afternoon is augmented reality, virtual reality. That's at 2:00. So this is Pacific time. Thanks for joining us. And we will be back soon. And I'm going to just say goodbye. And if you all could stay in the Zoom, don't leave. But I'm going to say bye to those of you on